My hands were steady when I walked into the chamber. That was the thing about 70 years of service. You learned to make your body lie about what you were feeling. I had read the minds of dying queens and war criminals and creatures who experienced reality in colors I had no name for. I had never once let my hands betray me. But the human was watching me differently. That was the problem. His name was Kalen Vance. 32 years old. A hydroponic farmer from a colony called Reach. No military training. No political connections. No reason in any of our profiles to be the first human ever brought before the Interstellar Concordium for formal cognitive evaluation. He had been chosen because his ship had a navigation error and drifted into our patrol space. That was all. Convenience. I remember thinking as I crossed the polished obsidian floor of the Concordium chamber that this would be routine. Surface scan. Emotional range. Threat classification. Numbers for the council. I had done this 1,200 times before. Archminister Therax of the Vethkal gave me the nod from his elevated seat. He was the oldest being in the chamber, his bronze skin faded to pale gold across 4 centuries of service. He spoke in the slow, deliberate way of someone who had learned that patience was the only currency that never devalued. Senior Reader Tez, sir. You may proceed. We require a standard evaluation. Nothing more. The council was full. All 9 seats occupied. Representatives from the Vethkal, the Marin Synod, the Oran Collective, the Durath Assembly, and 5 other civilizations whose names had no equivalent in any human language sat in a half-circle above the floor. Watching. Waiting. Kalen Vance was secured in a restraint chair at the center of the chamber. Soft restraints. Standard practice. Not because we expected violence. Because subjects sometimes reached involuntarily during a reading. He was not large. Lean, with the weathered skin of someone who worked outdoors. Dark hair. And his eyes, a pale, steady green, had been fixed on me since the moment I entered. I stopped in front of him. Raised my hands. He spoke first. In English. My color translator processed it in under a second. You're going to find it messy in there. I don't organize my thoughts very well. I paused. No subject had ever said anything like that before a first reading. No warnings. No requests for mercy. Just a quiet, practical observation delivered in a tone that was almost apologetic. I should have asked what he meant. I did not. I placed my fingertips against his temples and descended. The first step was surface thought. He was thinking about soil pH. About a crop rotation schedule. About a woman named Saria whose face appeared as a warm blur at the edge of his awareness. Normal. Agricultural. Boring. The second step was emotion. I found homesickness. Not sharp or painful. A low, persistent hum, like a machine running in the background of a house. I found curiosity about the chamber's ceiling. I found fear, genuine, specific fear of me, but also calm. Both things present at the same volume. Neither canceling the other. I had never read a mind that held contradiction without conflict. The third step was deeper. Memory. He had lost people. Not in war. In the ordinary way that his species lost things. To illness, to accident, to the simple attrition of time. Each loss had left a mark. But the marks were not wounds. They were more like structural reinforcements. Places where the architecture of him had grown stronger because something had pressed against it and not broken through. I descended to the fourth step. And the current caught me. His mind was not organized like any species I had read. No chambers. No ranks. No careful separation of one feeling from another. Everything was open. Grief and hope running in parallel streams. Exhaustion and determination sharing the same space. He had never resolved any of it. He had simply learned to carry all of it at once. And he had not fractured. That was what stopped me. A mind that holds opposing forces in open contact should collapse. Every cognitive model across every known species agreed on this. He had no resolution. He had no suppression. He had simply continued. I stood in the chamber, my hands still on his temples, and realized that 70 years of training had not prepared me for this. The council was watching. I had been reading for 12 seconds. My standard reports took 5. I withdrew my hands. They were shaking. Kalen Vance looked up at me with those calm green eyes and said, "I did warn you." I turned to face the council. My mouth opened. No words came. Archminister Therax leaned forward. "Senior Reader, your report." I said the only thing I could. "I need more time." The council granted me 12 hours. It was not generosity. It was confusion. They had never seen a senior reader request more time. They had never seen hands shake. I walked back to the holding corridor with the weight of 9 civilizations pressing against my spine and a human's quiet warning echoing in the space between my thoughts. Kalen Vance was exactly where I had left him. They had given him tea. He was holding the cup with both hands, looking out a filtered window at a garden he did not recognize. He did not turn when I entered. "You came back," he said. "I came back." I sat across from him. Equal height. I could not explain why that felt important. I placed my hands on the table between us. Empty. Not reaching for his temples. "Not yet. I need to go deeper," I said. "Not for the council. For me." He turned then. Those pale green eyes studied my face the way he might study soil before planting. Assessing. Patient. "What are you looking for?" "Your species has been on the edge of our monitored space for 70 years. You have not reached out. You have not retreated. You have simply been there. Watching. Waiting. Our models have no category for that behavior." He set down the cup. "Maybe your models are wrong. That is what I need to confirm." He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the garden's blue grass swayed in a wind that existed only inside this facility. Then he nodded. "Once. Not a surrender. A permission. Go as deep as you need." But I meant what I said. "It's messy in there." I rose. Walked around the table. Placed my fingertips against his temples. This time, I did not descend in careful stages. I fell. The 5th step was identity, not personality. The bedrock of what he understood himself to be. In most species, this level was a single clear note. A certainty. An anchor. In Kalen Vance, the 5th step was a conversation. 2 forces in continuous dialogue. One said, "The world is hard. People fail. Things break." The other said, "Yes." And neither voice won. Neither surrendered. The argument had been running for as long as he had been conscious. And the result was not paralysis. It was motion. He moved forward not because he had resolved his doubt. Because he had decided to move anyway. The 6th step was capability. The gap between what he could do and what he was doing. The gap was enormous. He was a farmer. His skills were irrigation schedules and harvest timing and the patience required to watch things grow. But beneath those skills, the potential was staggering. Pattern recognition. Adaptive problem-solving. Emotional regulation under pressure. Not perfected. Deeply flawed. But present. Waiting. And beneath capability, at the very bottom of the 6th step, I found something I had never encountered before. A choice. Not intelligence. Not instinct. A clean, deliberate, continuously renewed decision operating below conscious thought. He had decided what kind of person to be. He renewed that decision every day without thinking about it. The decision was simple. Be worth something to someone. I withdrew. The holding room came back around me in fragments. The table. The window. The blue grass. I was on my knees. My hands were pressed flat against the floor. Kalen Vance was leaning forward in his chair, concern sharp on his face. "Hey," he said. "You all right?" I looked up at him. 70 years. 1,200 readings. And I had never been asked that question by a subject. "How do you do it?" I asked. He seemed to understand what I meant. He sat back. Thought about it seriously. "I just don't stop," he said. "There's always a reason to stop. But the other side is usually worth more." I stood up. Straightened my robes. Walked back toward the council chamber. Behind me, the human drank his tea. Ahead of me, 9 civilizations were about to learn that their models had no category for what was coming. The vote was going to be close. I pushed open the doors. The chamber was silent when I entered. 9 council members in their elevated seats, arranged in the ancient hierarchy of the Concordium. Archminister Therax at the center, his pale gold face unreadable. Beside him, Elder Myra T. of the Marin Synod, whose 4 eyes had been watching me since I crossed the threshold. The others were equally still, equally patient, equally unaware that the ground beneath them had already shifted. I walked to the center of the floor. I did not bow. That was noticed. Senior Reader Tesser, Therax said. You have had your 12 hours. The council awaits your formal evaluation. I looked up at the 9 most powerful beings in this region of the galaxy. 70 years of service. 1,200 readings. I had never once hesitated to deliver a classification. I cannot provide numerical ratings, I said. The silence that followed was not the polite silence of waiting. It was the sharp silence of surprise. Explain, Therax said. Kalen Vance's cognitive architecture does not align with our scales. He processes contradictory emotions simultaneously without resolution. His emotional complexity and functional stability are directly correlated. The more he carries, the more capable he becomes. Our models assume the opposite. Elder Myra T. leaned forward. Her voice was dry as old paper. You are saying our assessment tools failed. I am saying they were not designed for this species. There is a difference. The Durath representative, a scarred veteran of First Contact Wars 3 centuries past, spoke without raising his hand. Then give us a threat classification. That requires no scale. Only judgment. I had been waiting for this question. I had rehearsed a dozen answers. I discarded all of them. He is not a threat, I said. His intentions are not hostile. His values are organized around a fundamental commitment to being useful to others. The Durath leaned back. Relief flickered across his weathered features. I continued. However, I cannot classify him as safe in the way we typically mean that word. The relief vanished. Kalen Vance represents a species that has survived repeated near-extinction events. They have developed capabilities under pressure that our assessments did not predict. They possess a cognitive and emotional architecture that our frameworks cannot accurately model. That is not the same as hostile intent. It is something more significant. I paused. The chamber was so quiet I could hear the ventilation system's distant hum. They are unpredictable. Not because they are chaotic. Because they are adaptable beyond what our models account for. And Kalen Vance is not exceptional. He is ordinary. He is a farmer. He is ordinary the way all humans are ordinary. I let that settle. My recommendation is this. Do not make a formal decision about humanity tonight. First, ask the human what he knows. Elder Marathi's 4 eyes narrowed. What could a farmer tell us that our long-range surveillance has not already revealed? I looked at her. At all of them. He knows that humanity has been aware of the Concordium for 11 years. They have been watching us. Waiting. Not in fear. In preparation. The silence that followed was the longest of my career. Therax spoke finally, his voice barely a whisper. How do you know this? Because I read it, I said. In the 6th step. In the place where choice lives. They have been testing themselves. Every year they chose not to reach out in panic or aggression. Every year they chose to become more stable. More ready. I looked up at the 9 faces above me. They were not waiting for us to be ready. They were waiting for themselves. No one spoke. I bowed, not in submission, in acknowledgement, and walked back toward the holding room. Behind me, the council began to argue. It sounded, for the first time in 4,000 years, like fear. Kalen Vance was still drinking his tea. He looked up when I entered. Told you it was messy, he said. I sat down across from him. Equal height. The council is going to vote, I said. It will be close. He nodded. What do you think they'll decide? I thought about Therax's hesitation. About Marathi's sharpened attention. About the Duratha's relief that turned to ash. I think, I said, we are about to find out what 4,000 years of diplomacy has actually built. Outside the window, the blue grass swayed. The human drank his tea. And somewhere above us, 9 civilizations stood at the edge of a decision they had never imagined needing to make. The vote took 2 hours. I waited in the holding room with Kalen Vance, not speaking, not needing to. He had finished his tea and was watching the garden through the filtered window. The blue grass moved in slow waves. The bird-like creatures had settled into the branches of a tree that was not quite a tree. "You're nervous," he said. "Not a question. I am calculating probabilities. There is a difference." He turned to look at me. "You do that thing with your hands when you're nervous. You fold them differently." I looked down at my hands. They were folded in the formal position, the one I used during difficult testimony. I had not noticed. I unfolded them. 70 years, I said. And a human cargo pilot reads me better than I read myself. He almost smiled. "Not cargo. Hydroponics. I grow food. You grow food. You drift into restricted space. You become the first ambassador between species." I shook my head. "Your file said you were ordinary." My file was right. The door opened. A junior attendant stood in the threshold, her head frills pressed flat, the posture of someone carrying news she did not want to deliver. "Senior Reader, the Council requests your presence. The vote has concluded." I stood. Kalen stood with me. "They didn't ask for me," he said. "No. But you are coming anyway." We walked the blue corridor together. His steps were steady. Mine were steadier than they had any right to be. The chamber doors opened. 9 faces looked down at us. Archminister Therax held a data slate in his ancient hands. His expression was unreadable, but his hands, I noticed, were also folded differently. "Senior Reader Tez-Sir, the Council has reached a decision." I waited. The vote is 5-4. 5-4. Not a mandate. A hesitation. A door held open by a single breath. "In favor of formal first contact," Therax continued, "contingent upon the following conditions. A human delegation will be received on Ethon Prime within 90 days. Communication channels will be established at a neutral location. And you, Senior Reader, will serve as the primary liaison." I had not expected that last part. Neither, apparently, had Kalen. He looked at me with those calm green eyes and said nothing. "I accept," I said. Therax inclined his head. "Then it is done." The other council members shifted in their seats. Some looked relieved. Some looked resigned. Elder Myra T., who had voted in favor, met my eyes and gave a single nod. The Durith representative, who had voted against, stared at a point on the far wall and did not move. I turned to Kalen. "You will go home. You will carry a communication device. You will tell your people that the door is open." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "And you?" "I will begin learning." He held my gaze. "You could come with me. For the first part, at least. If you're going to be the liaison, it would help to actually see where we live." It was not protocol. It was not in any briefing or procedure. It was also immediately and obviously the most sensible thing anyone had said since this began. I looked up at Therax. He looked back. After a long moment, he nodded once. "Arrange it," I said to the attendant. Kalen smiled. Fully this time. It changed his face, made him look younger, made him look exactly like what he was. An ordinary person who had been given an extraordinary moment and was trying to meet it well. "Ready?" he asked. I thought about 70 years of reading minds. About the 6th step. About the quiet, renewable decision to be worth something to someone. "Yes," I said. We walked out together. Behind us, the council began the long work of drafting the messages that would change everything. Ahead of us, a blue-green planet waited. And somewhere in the dark between stars, a species that had turned catastrophe into fuel and silence into preparation was about to receive the signal they had been waiting 11 years to hear. The door was open. The human was going home. And I was going with him. The journey to Earth took 16 days. Not because the distance was great, The Concordium had faster ships. Because Kalen asked if we could take his. A battered hydroponics vessel named Steady Ground, with patched hull plates and a garden in the cargo bay that he had not seen in 3 weeks. He wanted to check on his tomatoes. I sat in the co-pilot seat and watched him work. He talked to his plants. He named them. He apologized to a particularly wilted pepper seedling with genuine regret in his voice. This was the species the council had nearly voted to contain. A man apologizing to a vegetable. "You're staring," he said, not looking up. "I am observing." "You're staring." I looked out the viewport. Earth was a blue marble growing larger by the hour. Clouds swirled over oceans. Continents took shape beneath the haze. I had seen 1,000 worlds from orbit. This one looked different. Not because of what it was. Because of what lived on it. "We should send the signal," I said. Kalen set down his watering can. He stood beside me, looking at his homeworld with an expression I had no name for. Not pride. Not relief. Something quieter. "You send it," he said. "You're the liaison." I opened the communication channel. The Concordium's formal first contact protocol was 70 pages long. I had memorized it. I ignored almost all of it. "This is Senior Reader Tesser of the Interstellar Concordium," I said. "I am in orbit above your world with Kalen Vance, a citizen of your species. We are here because the Council has voted to open formal relations. We are here because your people have been waiting. And we are here because we have learned that our models for understanding you were incomplete." I paused. "You passed your own test. Now we would like to meet you." I closed the channel. Kalen was watching me. "That wasn't in the protocol," he said. "No, it was not." He smiled. "Good." The response came 47 minutes later. A woman's voice, steady and calm, speaking in the careful tones of someone who had been preparing for this moment for a long time. "Senior Reader Tesser. This is Minister Elena Cross, United Earth External Affairs. We have been expecting you. Please transmit your landing coordinates. And tell Kalen we're glad he's home." Kalen laughed. It was the first time I had heard him laugh. It was a good sound. We landed at a facility called Meridian Station. The delegation was waiting, not soldiers, not politicians, a group of scientists and diplomats and one woman with gray hair and steady hands who introduced herself as Minister Cross. She looked at Kalen first. Then at me. "Your council voted 5-4, she said. "How did you know that?" She almost smiled. "We have been watching you too, Senior Reader. For 11 years. We know the names of every council member. We know their voting records on other first contact decisions. We made predictions about how they would vote on us." I stared at her. "What were your predictions?" 5-4 in favor. Margin of error less than 2%. Kalen looked at me. "Told you we were ready." I spent the next 30 days on Earth. I walked through cities and farms and museums. I read history not from files but from the people who had lived it. I met the woman with dark hair from Kalen's memory, Saria. She hugged him for a long time at the landing bay and then shook my hand and said, "Thank you for bringing him back." I learned that humanity's silence had not been passive. They had built 1,000 contingency plans. They had written 1,000 draft first messages. They had prepared for war, for trade, for indifference, for friendship. And then they had done the hardest thing. They had waited. On the 31st day, I sent my final report to the Concordium. It was not numerical. It was one sentence. They are not a species to be contained, categorized, or controlled. They are a species to be learned from. Therax sent back a single word, proceed. I closed my communicator. Kalen was in the cargo bay, watering his tomatoes. Saria was making tea. Through the viewport, Earth turned slowly beneath a field of patient stars. I had read 10,000 minds. None had changed me like this one. Not because it was extraordinary. Because it was ordinary. And the ordinariness, the small, persistent decency of a man who grew food and talked to his plants and warned a telepath to be careful, that was the extraordinary thing. The door was open. The human was home. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I picked up a cup of tea. It was warm. For once. The formal delegation arrived 93 days after the vote. Not 90. 93. The council had insisted on precision. The humans had agreed without comment, which should have told us something about their patience. I met the delegation at Meridian Station. Minister Elena Cross led them. Behind her walked diplomats, scientists, and one hydroponic farmer who had been asked to come because, as Cross put it, he already knows how to talk to you. Kalen shook my hand. "You look different," he said. "I have been eating your vegetables. They are improving my temperament." He laughed. The delegation toured the Concordium facilities. They asked sharp questions and listened to answers. They did not posture. They did not threaten. They took notes and compared observations and thanked people for their time. The council members, watching through secure feeds, began to understand what I had tried to tell them. These were not petitioners. These were partners. The official signing of the Mutual Recognition Accord took place on Ethon Prime, in the same chamber where the vote had been held. The 9 council members sat in their elevated seats. The human delegation stood on the floor. No one sat above anyone else. I had argued for that arrangement. Therax had resisted. Elder Myra T. had supported me. The vote was 6-3. Progress. Minister Cross signed first. Then Therax. Then the others, in order of seniority. The ceremony lasted 14 minutes. No one applauded. Applause would have been wrong for this. Instead, there was a silence, not tense, not heavy. The silence of people who understood that they had just done something that would be remembered for a very long time. Afterward, Kalen found me in the corridor. He was holding a cup of tea. He offered it to me. "I'm going back to Reach tomorrow," he said. "The tomatoes won't wait forever. You will be missed." He shook his head. "No, I won't. That's the point. The work is done. Now it's up to the professionals." I took the tea. It was warm. "You were a professional," I said. "You just had a different job." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "What will you do now?" I thought about it. 70 years of reading minds. 1,200 subjects. One human who had changed everything. "I will stay here," I said. "I will be the liaison. I will learn. And when the next human arrives, the official delegation, the ambassadors, the ones who come with titles and protocols, I will remember that the first one was a farmer who warned me to be careful." Kalen smiled. "That's a good memory to keep." He walked away. Down the blue corridor, past the garden with the blue grass, toward the docking bay where his battered ship waited. I watched him go. He did not look back. He did not need to. I finished the tea. I walked back to the chamber. The council was already drafting the next set of agreements. Trade. Cultural exchange. Scientific collaboration. The ordinary work of 2 civilizations learning to exist together. I sat in the observer gallery and watched them work. Outside the window, the stars were doing nothing in particular. That was fine. They did not need to do anything. We were doing enough. In the cargo bay of the Steady Ground, a hydroponic farmer watered his tomatoes and thought about a telepath who had learned to be careful in a different way. On Reach, a woman with dark hair prepared a room for his return. At Meridian Station, Minister Elena Cross filed a report that said, simply, "The door is open." They walked through. Now we build. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the Concordium's long-range monitors recorded a new signal. Not from Earth. From Reach. A single transmission, time-stamped and logged. It said, "The tomatoes are thriving. Send more tea." I read the transmission. I did not file it in any official record. I put it in a small folder in the bottom drawer of my desk. The folder had no label. It did not need one. Some things you keep. Not because they are important to history. Because they are important to you. I poured fresh tea. It was warm. And for the first time in 70 years, I did not care about the next reading. I was exactly where I needed to be.